Hello everyone, can you hear me? Oh, thank you. Appreciate. Someone said yes. Good. Sorry, we're a little bit late. Couldn't figure out how to start, but we figured out. So we have a full agenda today and exciting topic. So looking at the agenda, we have group size ratios and mixed age grouping standards, and Valisa will help us to review what I was proposing and what I was thinking about, and we are looking forward for your comments and your suggestions and conversations. We really appreciate how it's been done last time when we discussed professional development. So let's just keep with the same type of approach. You will type very actively your comments, your suggestions, your recommendations, your reactions, and we will read the questions and we will give the answers. If we cannot give the answers immediately, then we will follow up with them. But let's do the same thing, and again, please be as active as possible. It's very helpful for us to hear your voices and understand where you are with what we're proposing. Then we will do the updates. We'll go back to the professional development standards. We reviewed your comments and recommendations, and thank you again for everyone who's been advocating and pushing for your perspective, how it's supposed to be developed. We will present to you today our additional thinking and a couple of things that we believe through your recommendations will be possible to embed into the professional development standards. So let's discuss what we have, and then if there are additional things that you would like to bring to our attention, please do. The community feedback process is about to start. Actually, it started in Spokane this week. I shared with you already, you have a handout with a schedule. We will look specifically at where materials are located, and I will answer your questions if you have any. And then we will talk about the updated timeline for the standards alignment process. So this is our agenda for today. And we will move forward with group size ratios and mixed age grouping standards, and we will give Valisa a chance to talk about it.
Lisa, are you there? I'm sorry, I didn't unmute you right away.
I am here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to walk through two different things. The first one is around ratios and group size, and the second piece is on mixed age grouping. And both of these areas are in the WACs, and so they have been under discussion as part of the looking at each of the WACs individually. So starting with the ratios and group size, and I believe everybody's been sent an overview document that provides a little bit more detail about the thinking that went into how these two different elements would fit into the new set of WACs. So if you have that, that's great, and I'm going to just go through a high-level overview of that. So it came as a recommendation from the writing team who is looking at each of the WACs to take a think about whether or not we have the right ratios for children and the right group sizes. Are they appropriate to meeting Washington's goals? So we took a step back and took a look at the ratios. And what we know is that Washington nationally actually has quite low ratios in comparison with other states. But it actually does not meet best practices that are outlined in several documents. So caring for our children's basics was what we really referred to. And we're close, but we are not at those best practice levels yet. So the writing team took a look at whether or not we could meet those best practice levels. And I want to be really clear, we're looking specifically at the center WACs right now and not the family homes. The writing teams did not make suggestions for changing the ratios within family homes, really just taking a look at centers. So we came up with two options, and the first is what would it mean to change the ratios and to make the ratios lower, and what would it mean to keep the current ratios and then build a progression for lower ratios in early achievers and ECAP. So if you move to the next slide, we did some pros and cons on each one. So what would it mean to change the ratios? Well, it would mean that we would really be taking a stand around meeting the best quality standards, and that we know that low ratios are really good for kids. Within the cons, there are a lot of implications for what changing the ratios would mean. Financial pressures across the system being a significant one. It would mean increase in subsidy rates and ECAP rates, could potentially mean increased costs for families because providers would have fewer children in each classroom. That would have implications on the capacity in the system to serve children. And that also would have implications on capacity within ECAP as we reduced the ECAP ratios. So the implications on reducing the ratios are pretty significant. So then we looked at the pros and cons of changing the ratios within a progression and allowing for different ratios at higher levels of early achievers and ECAP. So the pros to that is it really does support what we're trying to do with the progression of the standards alignment. Keeps current capacity in the system, but does allow for lower ratio at higher levels of quality. Cons, of course, is it's not aligned with best practices to keep the existing ratios, but as I said earlier, we do have pretty strong ratios in Washington State. So the next slide. So this slide maps out the current WAC requirements in the first column. What we're putting forward is proposed WACs, and then a proposed early achievers progression. And then if you look at the right column, that's what's considered best practices in caring for our children's basics. So the real changes that we would be looking at are around the proposed early achievers standards, that they would be allowable with smaller ratios to have larger group sizes. So instead of 1 to 4 with 8 children max, it would allow for up to 9 children in a grouping with 3 adults. I'm sorry, yes, that's right. And the same would be true in the toddler age, that it would allow for larger group sizes with lower ratios. The other change that we have are putting on the table is ECAP and lowering the ECAP ratios to 1 to 8. And there are, of course, a lot of implications for that as well. The cost for ECAP, the capacity in our system for serving more children with ECAP, the implications for a mixed delivery system. So this is sort of our proposed for discussion set of ideas. So what I'd like to do is open it up and have people provide some comments and feedback on what do you think, and are we headed in the right direction? Are there other things we should consider when thinking about the ratios?
Can you talk a little bit about capacity in regard to the ratios? Those,
capacity in the system?
Yeah, 50% must be 18 months or older. What does it mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. So we've looked at, particularly within sort of in the proposed WAC, is to thinking about the ratios in terms of the age groupings as well. So within preschool, the preschool age, the ratios would be based on the number of children that are aged 3 versus aged 4. So if you have more 3-year-olds, the ratios within early achievers could be 1 to 8. But if you have more 4-year-olds, then you could have higher ratios. So you could serve more children because the children would be older. So that's actually one of the proposals that we're putting forward as well, is to think more, instead of just a flat set of ratios, is to think about it within the context of the age of children. The same would be true for toddlers. If you have more older toddlers, you could have higher ratios than if you have more younger toddlers.
So far we have one comment. Please note the age grouping on preschool is actually ages 30 months through 6 years of age, which is the definition of the preschool in RCW. One more comment. You also have to take into consideration of the cost to operate financially at these lower ratios. And I support lower ratios, but where is the increased funding going to come from? When you say propose for early achievers, does that mean to achieve at level 3? It's a question. I will repeat it. When you say propose for early achievers, does it mean to achieve at level 3? Yes, when we're talking about early achievers,
I think what we mean when we say that is that if you're a level 3 provider, it gives you permission to operate at those higher levels as opposed to being a threshold to achieve a level 3.
oh, okay.
Yes, that it's an allowable use to have higher group sizes with lower ratios in early achievers, but not a requirement is my understanding.
One more question. What is the ratio for toddlers under 10 months? 10 months, 18 months. 18 months, I'm sorry. So as you remember, we have group ages in our box that line up in the left column. So for infants are from 0 to 11 months, and then toddlers will be on a group of from 12 to up to 30 months. So it means that for 18 months child, the ratio could be as for 30 months child, from 1 to 7 up to 14 children in a classroom. But what we are proposing that we will put a capacity regulation into it. So it means that if we will have more younger children, then then they will not be able to have 14 max. So this particular 14 max in 1 to 7 works if you have more older children versus younger children. It seems, this next comment, the question, it seems like lowering the ratios for early achiever providers will be significant disincentive to providers to join state, particularly if they don't have subsidy kids, so they wouldn't be getting a quality award. The infant and toddler ones seem like choices for the provider, but preschool looks more like a straight loss for them.
Well, I think that's why with the early achievers, it's, I see what you're saying, that they can, that if they chose to increase their group size by having more staff, then that could be a loss to them. However, we're saying that early achievers, it's not a requirement that they meet the ratio. It's an option that if you're providing higher level of care, we will allow you more flexibility and that you can have a larger group size. I think that's the proposal on the table.
So would current infant room sizes include 9 infants and 3 teachers? Increasing the number of toddlers allowed in one room seems counterintuitive in terms of increasing quality. So we're not saying that it's preclude, but what we're saying is it's allowable at early achievers level. We would like to keep the ratio 1 to 4 with a group size of 8, but we also understand that if we will have a ratio 1 to 3 with additional staff in a room, it means that the quality will actually increase. Okay. Yeah, okay.
So when this is Nicole, so how will the different ratios between, looks like pre-K and 30 months to K. Oh, 30 months to K of ECAP work with child care providers who are also doing ECAP. The 1 to 10 for preschool doesn't align with the 1 to 8 for ECAP. So this is accurate, and these are, again, recommendations. And if you are operating ECAP, as we think about the progression of standards, you need to meet all of the standards below, and at the highest level, if you're doing state-funded pre-K, you need to meet that standard. So it could be in that center that you may have some classrooms that are not ECAP and would be following one ratio, but the ECAP classroom, regardless of the number of ECAP children in that classroom, would need to follow the ECAP ratio. This is similar to how it worked before we changed the ratio to 1 to 10 to match with licensing. The next question is, what is the max if they're under 18? So if the group size is 17, and we're saying that it cannot be more than 50% of children who are under 18, it means that there could be 60 children. Am I dividing correctly? 17 in half? 8 children who are less than 18 months, or 18 months up to 18 months. Can centers choose to run some ages at the proposed early achiever standards and some at the WAC level? So I think the answer to that, again, is that if you're operating at an early achiever level 3 or higher, what we're saying is that you have some flexibility to change your ratios and group size. Here's a comment about the ECAP. We recognize the need for the state to manage the ECAP program, but question the need to impose restrictions on independent providers in order to achieve good state data. And so, Dee, this is Nicole, and I guess I need some more information about your question or what your concern is. Next one. For child care, this increase will be reflected on parent fees. Has there been consideration about an increase with subsidy payments? I agree with the low ratios. It's just hard to fund this change along with all of the other changes such as education. So before we will go further, I would like to go back to the chart, because I don't think that we're increasing much in the WAC. So I don't know for sure what we're talking about. So let's go back to the chart and go age group by age group. So what we currently have in the WAC for 0 to 11, 1 to 4, 8 max. What we're proposing in WAC, 1 to 4, 8 max, it didn't change. What we're saying that we can allow in early achievers, if the provider would like to do it, 1 to 3 was 9 max. So going to the next age group, 12 months up to 29 months. Currently, in current WAC, we're requiring 1 to 7 with an age group of 14 max. What we're proposing, the same thing, 1 to 7, age group 14. The only additional thing that we're proposing, that capacity, and you will go back to the family child care licensing regulations, it's where we're allowing also this type of mixed age grouping in family homes, but we're also putting some capacity regulations, how many children of what age could be blended together. So this is what we are proposing again. In order to ensure the quality, because we all know how complicated and difficult is to run a group of young toddlers with a group size of 14, and how unsafe it could be in a number of situations, and how difficult to arrange learning environments for young toddlers if you have a majority of them in a group. We're just proposing to balance the group so the learning environments will be safer, as well as learning activities will be, it will be possibility to do some learning. Going to the next age group, preschool, 30 months up to K, 5 to 6 is definition is saying. What we currently have in the WAC is 1 to 10 and a group size up to 20.
what we're proposing, the same thing, 1 to 10, the group size up to 20. Addition to it, again, a capacity. How many children in a group of 20 you may have who are younger than 48 months? So 5 to 12 school age, didn't touch. ECAP, this is the only place where we are proposing what it used to be in ECAP. What's been changed per licensing because of the implementation of early achievers, and now we're going back to what used to be 2 years ago. So it's why you're kind of confusing me when you're writing that we're lowering something. So I will go back to the comments and questions. Okay, the next comment, maybe this is coming up later in presentation, but I'm wondering if we will be talking about the option of mixed age grouping, specifically for infants and toddlers in the classroom is operating. Yes, we will talk about it after we will continue our discussion about ratios and group size. Next one, I'm confused about the preschool category. The group max size is the same as the current WAC for 48 months or above, but lower for 36 and 47. So what was the upside? Am I missing something? If it's just me, feel free to ignore this, but I'll ask someone later. So it could be some challenge in regard of the enrollment, because I can see how it may impact the practice, because right now the providers are enrolling without consideration of what particular subgroup of this age group they're enrolling. So they're not thinking about capacity, how many of this particular age group they can enroll compared to how many of this particular age can enroll. So they will have to think more precisely in regard of enrollment. If they already have, let's say, 6 or 7 children who are younger than 48 months, then they will have to think about, now I have to enroll who are older than 48 months. So I can see the challenge of enrollment, but I don't see any challenges in the regard of their revenue. Next one, will you get points in early achievers for having the smaller ratios, or is the only incentive the increased group size?
It's not going to be a points-based increase, but you can bet that the classroom quality will probably improve with more adults in the room.
Will it make learning difficult to have different ratios in the beginning of the year to the end of the year? For example, children that were 3 at the beginning of the year will turn 4 during the school year. It's a great question, and it's what, for example, Head Start and Early Head Start consistently are looking at in regard of mixed age grouping, 3 and 4 years old. Head Start has the same type of requirement. You cannot serve more than some percentage of the 3 years old with mixed age grouping of 3 and 4. This is something to, it's actually a really good comment. This is something to consider if children will stay with 12 months eligibility as long as a year, and they will become older, mature, whatever we will like to say. So then it's a good comment. Let us think about it and figure out how it may play. Thank you for this comment. This makes little sense to me. We're allowing quality childcare providers to lose money essentially, which is unlikely to actually happen. So I have to understand, I'm not quite sure what it's about. So can you tell us more? Has there been conversation about group size being extended for school age in large environments with low ratios such as 1 to 10 up to 14 max? What specific age groups we're talking about. Are we talking about school age? We do know that Montessori allowing up to 26, but up to 40 is an interesting idea. So can you tell us more what particular age group you have in mind?
I think she said school age there.
Okay, it's a school age. So the school age is not right part of what we're discussing, because as we remember from the beginning, we are bounded with licensing, specifically looking at non-school age. So we have a pilot, school age pilot, that is in development right now that will look at the school age children and their grouping. I don't know for sure, maybe Nicole can say more.
About ratio size?
Yeah, ratio and group size.
I mean, there may be some things that we look at that with the pilot that are that have a direct relation to quality, but that's not a specific thing that we're looking at.
I like role ratios, but if it comes without money, we're all of loss and out of business. One more time, I would like to ask where you see the lower ratios. Are we talking about ECAP or what particular age group we're talking about? It's very general in a generic statement. Can you tell me more? Do you want to take the next one, Nicole?
Yeah, so I'm just going to look at the group of questions that are on ECAP. Thank you. It's Friday. So I think one of the things that we need to think about with ECAP and cost per child is what are the increases we need to make in cost per child to support the direction we're going that's not only related to ratios, but our move towards full school day and some of those pieces as we think about trying to reach our 90% goal of all 90% of all kindergartners being ready. We have had ratios at 1 to 9, and we have 3s and 4s that are sometimes in the same classroom. So I'm happy to have a conversation or Katie have an offline conversation with you about this. I think I want to reiterate again in early achievers, what we're saying is you have an opportunity to operate at those lower ratios, but it's not required. In the ECAP recommendations, it's a recommendation, and that's why we're presenting it to this group today.
Here's another comment. Also, 9 babies in one group is a lot. I would say having more than 8 babies in a group is too much. And are we talking babies as infants, or are we talking babies as young toddlers? And this is exactly what we're trying to limit. If you will be fine and this particular recommendation will move forward, if you go back to the chart again and look at for the 0 to 1 babies, infants, we have a group size which is max 8. For the 12 to 29-month babies, we have a group size 14, but it's what we are proposing to limit the number of young toddlers, so it will not be more than 8 in a group size of 14. Next comment, because many independent programs implement a model that specifically supports more children in a classroom, try to supportive environment where are more effective with a larger group and less without intervention. Instead, we're able to employ support staff that are able to manage specific activities and provide support for teacher planning time. Services support waivers or graduate allowances. I think in this particular case, we're talking about specific model or specific models, and this is what we can look at in regard of how the specific models could be accommodated. So the next one for Nicole, what would actually be helpful
I actually already addressed that one. So, Katie, I think we just need, you and I have a conversation. Would suggest that you consider aligning with Head Start standards. It's actually a great idea. We've been looking at it. Katie, what the issue is that right now we have different age grouping. And we've been heavily discussing it at the steering committee. But without going to legislation and asking legislation to change the definition of age groups, before we will do that, it will not allow us to align with the Head Start. So as you see, the difference, as you know, not only see, as you know, the difference in age grouping is that we will have to divide the young group from 0 to, in early Head Start, from 0 to up to 3 years old. And then from 3 years old, which is 6 months, not 30 months, up to 5. So this is something to discuss with advocacy groups. If advocacy groups will be interested to approach it and help us to go to legislation and change the language, it will be something to consider. We also have to look at how it may possibly impact the industry and business runners and providers. But unfortunately, right now, we cannot align with Head Start. The next one, but maybe having the extra teacher will make it worse for the babies. Absolutely. Having extra, what we have in WAP is just the minimum. If you'd like to bring extra staff with the group size of 8, please do. We can look at Educare model. Educare has a group size for infants as well as for toddlers, which is 1 to 4 ratio and 8 group size, but requires also have an extra staff person in the room. So absolutely, better quality is a great idea. So unfortunately, we cannot set up a webinar in a way that it will allow us all see each other's comments or speak up, because this is how this particular webinar is set up. So we definitely explore a possibility to have so everyone can see the comments as well as everyone can talk. The difference in the toddler age group between proposed WAP and Caring for Our Children basic is 3 children to a teacher hire, but in infant is the same, and in preschool is 1 or 2 different. Based on the research for brain development, under 2, could this not be taken into consideration for a change in WAP in this one area? For example, we talked about it at the steering committee, and we do believe that right now it will present a huge impact to the industry. And maybe we will need to go back to the drawing board and see how it will be possible to do, but we do believe it will right now impact the industry tremendously. It's a great conversation maybe to have with center directors, and if we have some center directors or who knows the center process right now online, please share your comments. What type of impact it could be, if there will be difference in 1 to 2 children, what is the impact on your revenue it could be. The next one is, if a center uses the low ratio, will the subsidy be higher for those spots? So as we know right now, the fee reimbursement, subsidy fee reimbursement is linked to your success with early achievers. So it's not directly linked to low group size. I think it's a combination of different components in early achievers level 3, level 4, level 5, is where the fee reimbursement is kicking in. In general, as always, my recommendation for this group is to align existing standards, not add new expensive things.
This is a good opportunity to talk about these issues, but alignment itself is a huge project, and we are consistently overreaching in an attempt to create a perfect system in an environment scarce resources. Thank you, Katie, for reminding us about it. Our clips allow us to be placed next to each other, end to end, with a barrier, or must there be space on all sides? Room size really may be a limiting factor. It's a good point, and I think we need to look at the WAC and what WAC is requiring right now. And if you're considering to look at the WAC in regard of the space and space around the grids and how we're allowing to do that, it's something to consider, because I can see there. I can see the thought that if we're changing their ratios or group sizes, then we'll also have to look at the space requirements. Good point. We will look at it about. Besides trying to get to a data point on the rule chart, is there any actual safety concerns that have been raised on current group size and ratios? Yes, there is some safety concerns, and specifically with the groups, with the age group of 12 to 29 months, with a max of 40 children. And because currently we don't have a capacity regulations around it, and we all know with 2 adults in a classroom with young toddlers, there are a lot of possibilities for different type of issues. And this is what we're trying to prevent. You know, one of the reasons why comments are confusing is that they're only able to be typed into the little box. Yes, I understand it, Katie. I'm sorry. This is the capacity of the webinar that we currently have. And I understand it's uncomfortable, but you're always welcome to come to Olympia, all of you. As you know, we have a room right now over here with a bunch of space available. Also, for the proposed WAC for preschool, what is the ratio if more than 50% are under 48 months? So the ratio is still the same. The ratio is 1 to 7. But there will be less young children, or at least the number of young children will be regulated. The examples are all of state and federal funding, but what about privately funded and using on the state subsidy, which does not pay for the cost of care? So I would like to go back to what we currently have and what we are proposing. As you see, we are not proposing to change the group size or ratios. We're only proposing to limit the capacity of the particular ages. With toddlers as well as with preschoolers. So in reality, if a provider will be private provider, a business runner, if the provider will establish an enrollment process that will allow a provider to have a right balance, a right ratio, it will not anyhow impact the provider in regard of how many children the provider will be able to serve. Okay, I think I understand it now. It might be easier for people to understand if you split the preschool row in the table into 3 rows, 30 to 65 months, 56 to 47 months, and 48 months to kindergarten. The advantage of the extra options for early achiever providers is only when they have mostly younger preschoolers that would make the room subject to the total standards under the proposed law. Actually, it's a great idea. We will to present it. Thank you, Karen. So we will try to use the idea and organize charts differently. So hopefully it will be easier to for people to see what they are proposing. Okay, it's a good idea. We will do that. So what the ask is to increase our awareness of the discussion. Could we please get a transcript of the questions and responses following the webinar? So, and you know, all webinars are archived. So your questions as I'm reading them are archived, and my answers and other answers as we've been giving to you are archived. So you always can go to the archived materials and listen to them again. If you'd like us to type them and develop transcripts of them, we definitely can do that too. Let's see if we will find the capacity to actually listen to the webinar and type the recording. But those are available for you all the time. And Marine usually sending you an email saying, this is where you can find archived materials.
So thank you for your comments and recommendations for the group size and ratios. So we are moving forward with next part of the same conversation, which is mixed age grouping. We'll give it back to Valisa.
Thank you. So similarly, the conversation has come up about how to think about mixed age groupings in the WACs, and this has been more and more prevalent, particularly with new program models such as the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, who are looking at mixed age groupings. And just to be clear, we are talking about this from a center-based approach as well. Right now, family homes already have WACs that include mixed age groupings, and there were not recommendations to change that. So it's specifically looking at centers and how to approach mixed age groupings in the center WACs. So we came up with 3 different options, and the options are not mutually exclusive, so it could end up being a combination of these options. So right now, while there is some mixed age grouping that's allowable, others, such as the model for the Early Head Start Child Care Partnership, people need to request a waiver in order to be able to do mixed age groupings. So option 1 is just keep the waiver system. It's what's currently working. It's what people can do. People who are doing these different models can get a waiver for mixed age grouping. So I'm sorry, could you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So we went to some pros and cons about why would we change this. Let's just keep it as it is. So keeping it as it is does allow for a clear quality screen and assessment to make sure that programs are appropriately using mixed age groups. So it does allow sort of a personalized look at each program before that waiver is made. The cons are that we really aren't using, if we keep the current waiver system, we're really not using this standards alignment progression to fix this problem of how do we make sure that people who have program models that do use mixed age groups, that they are able to do so. So the first one is keep everything as it is. People can still get waivers. The second option we came up with, if you flip to the next slide, please, is what would it mean to actually use the WACs? So it would mean that there'd be more promotion of mixed age groups and continuity of care in programs. The WACs could offer a lot more clarity about the requirements that would need to be developed in order to do mixed age groups, and it would be a lot easier to administer. But the cons are that it does not allow for that additional review to make sure that programs that are using mixed age groups are doing so with all the health and safety standards and quality assurance needed. Also, if more programs are moving to this, there may be more supports that programs need in order to be able to do this well. So second option, change the WACs and figure out all the details that would need to be included in order for programs to be able to use a mixed age group model. And then the third option, if you move to the next slide, please, thanks, is to think about mixed age grouping as a progression and for early achievers. So if essentially programs that do score level 3 or higher on early achievers would have the option to start doing a mixed age group program. So that would be part of, it's certainly aligned with the goals of the standards alignment process. It is based on a quality assurance because we know that the programs have already, thank you, have already met the quality level of a level 3. The cons to that are that it essentially would mean that programs would have to participate in early achievers in order to use mixed age groups. So we have also thought that it might be not one of these options, but a combination of the options. So essentially it's allowable. Option 3 means that it become allowable in early achievers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that option 1, which is you get a waiver, would necessarily be off the table. So those were the 3 options that we came up with to think about how to address mixed age groupings in the WAC revisions. And I'll stop there and see if people have questions or comments about what would be the best way to move forward in this conversation.
So far we have a couple of comments.
Another con seems like current system of waivers presents administrative complexity. It's true. How about tying mixed age group flexibility to lower ratio? It's a great idea. Let's look at it more precisely. What specifically you mean by it, Kelly? Can you go back a slide? Do you want to go to option 1 or option 2? Let's go to option 2, I guess, is what Kate is asking about. So I would like to go back to another concept like current system of waiver present administrative complexity, because not maybe all of you know that we changed the waiver process. Department of Early Learning changed the waiver process, so we allowing now programs to apply for a waiver for the mixed age grouping. Because as you remember, in the past we allowed only a waiver based on the child needs. But now we're allowing a waiver based on the programmatic needs, like for example, Early Head Start Child Care Partnerships can use it, or any other program who can present us how they will keep their health and safety in place with mixed age grouping, and how programmatically they will be able to overcome possible issues. We will definitely consider the request and look at the possibility to grant the waiver. What is the definition of mixed ages, like 2 years old with 5 years old? It depends on the programming. Let's put it this way. Because, for example, with infants with Early Head Start, it's a possibility to operate based on the Early Head Start performance standards, which is mixing infants and toddlers together. So it's from birth up to 36 months. So this is one possibility to group. There could be other possibilities, as you've been saying. So we still would like to, first of all, think about safety of children and how, if we're allowing programs to do it, how we can ensure that children are safe and healthy. But this is one of the things in regard to the continuity of care that programs have been asking for a very long time, specifically for infants and toddlers. Allowing waivers would serve to define the pattern of needs, such as a mixed infant-toddler classroom, which can serve families better, especially in rural areas, of programs that would not have enough or either age group to support the program for these children. It's another way why it's important to have it, or important to consider to have it. Connecting availability of mixed age groupings to demonstrate quality does seem like a good way to address the concerns that have been raised in the past about allowing infants and toddlers in the same space. It acknowledges that programs with high quality have the skill necessary to manage with safety. So it seems to me that you are supporting mixed age grouping. Do you have specific preferences in regard of what particular option? So what would be option 2, where we're specifically looking at allowing it in licensing regulations at the WAC level, or would you suggest to look at option 3 as a progression, but at the same time the waiver process will still be in place? So for providers who are not at level 3, who are still at level 2, they will go through the waiver process and apply for a waiver as a program or their child needs. Would there be a new WAC ratio for mixed ages? No. If it will be allowed to mix infants and toddlers, that we will have to go with a low group size. So the group size will not allow you to serve more than 8 children. So you will not be able to bring infants to the group size to up to 14. So this is, again, going back to the quality and caring for our children. So in some ways, bringing toddlers to the infant rooms versus bringing infants to the toddler room. Mixed age groups in children under 3, okay, it already allows there to be a larger developmental age range and reduce the waiver burden for child care providers. They would be able to have groups with mixed older infants who are working with toddlers, who are working while still allowing non-working young toddlers to stay with their developmental age group. Without the mixed age grouping, children are moved on their birthday, not on their development level. It's a good point. In some way, it's what possibly you can do. You can allow infants to stay with young toddlers and in a group size of 8, and all the toddlers could go to the preschool group later. Let's say not in 30 months, but in 56 months. So this is definitely something for people to consider. But again, it's a good question about the group size. It's not bringing infants to their toddlers. It's bringing toddlers to the infant group. I like number 3, but I recognize the problem for Montessori, which do great work on their model. And again, for example, with Montessori, this is something for us to consider. I do know that there are a lot of alignment going on, and Rachel maybe can talk more about what is happening with Montessori schools right now in regard of the certification and how they will become a part of the early achievers.
Dee might actually be able to speak to it as well. I know
she will not be able to answer.
So the Montessori provider, so there's a group, the Pacific Northwest Montessori Association has developed a verification process where they are actually going through and sites can apply to have their programs verified to make sure that they're meeting the Montessori standards. And that verification certification is a part of the application they submit to DEL licensing for their waiver process.
So Dee is saying that Montessori schools supported the expansion of the preschool group to age 6. It seems like the combination of group size ratio proposed WAC and the mixed age groups would make it advantageous for providers to move children at the younger end of the age range down to the younger groups to get above the 50% over age standards to have bigger ratios where there is an option. Moving a 36-month-old down to the toddler room would make the toddler room a high percentage over 18 months and the preschool room a high percentage over 48 months. Good point, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, so it seems to me that you all in favor of mixed age grouping, and we don't have a full understanding. Do you like it to be at the level of WAC, so allow it to have as a part of the licensing process, or allow it to move to the progression level, so licensed providers who at level 2 will be able to go with the waiver process, but licensed providers who at level 3 will be allowed to do mixed age grouping. So if you will have some specific recommendations, or either option 2 or option 3 or combination of whatever you would like to propose, please let us know so we will be able to
consider your recommendations and finalize the standards. Last comment. No, one more?
Flexibility and overlapping age groups would allow for better playing with parents, for staffing, and for reviews. So it's a question. So 3 doesn't require WAC at all. So option 3
is allowing to submit a waiver at the license level who are below 3. But at level 3 in early achievers, you will be able to use the mixed age grouping. So this is the difference between 2 and 3. So with this, I will move to the next topic. If there are no more comments, and talk about the community feedback. So as you remember, there is the next round of the community engagement that is already in a process, as Spokane just had the first meeting on April 12th, and Nicole been representing the department right there, and the next meeting in Spokane will happen next Monday, and Rachel will be representing the department right there. What you have in front of you, because I sent you a handout, is a schedule, it's a draft of the schedule of different feedback community meetings around the state. There are a couple of regional coalitions who didn't make their decision yet, and I already have a couple of changes. So Southwest and Southeast, they don't have the date set up yet. North Central changed their date from April 23rd to May 14th. So if you'd like to edit your handout, please do. So North Central is not April 23rd, it's May 14th. So you also have contact information for different leads in different regions. If you would like to find out more what is happening in your specific community. All alignment community feedback meeting materials are being developed with facilitation of Thrive by 5 by the work group that been representing early learning coalitions. And you can find all of the materials at the Thrive website that you have on the slide. Director Hunter put together a very brief short address to the communities and members of the communities who will participate in the meetings. You can view this address by using this particular YouTube link that you have in your slide. If you can move. Yeah, thank you. Now we're in the right place. Materials are in the process of to be translated per the regional early learning coalition request to Spanish, Tamil, and Russian. If there are any other languages that you believe in your communities the materials need to be translated, please let me know. And I will highly encourage you to contact your regional coalition and offer your support and help, because you're experts in the process, and I'm more than sure that they will appreciate your support and help in facilitation small group conversations.
So, so Katie, there was the first meeting that happened on Monday. There were some kinks that needed to be worked out, and people can comment on the content. And so I believe Spokane is thinking about how they might loop back around with those folks. But there are other opportunities to provide input, and if your board chair would like to provide that input directly to us, she may. So lessons learned as we're moving forward with this work in community.
So the last piece that I would like to talk about is the new timeline or updated timeline. So as we've been moving through this process, and we appreciate your consistent support and your consistent involvement and active engagement in this process, there's been a number of changes that we've been experiencing. And the new development is that two activities with the union are kind of in dependency upon each other. So as you know, department is annually engaged in their bargaining process with their home-based providers, with family home-based providers union. At the same time, we also this year have activity around negotiation the standards with the union. So, and those two things kind of are codependent on each other. So if you will look at the new timeline, you will see that in April, May, we scheduled to do community feedback and also focusing on cultural humility lens. And we are writing and reviewing the standards actively. It's what we do right now. Then in June and July, there will be legal review of the standards because we will have a final draft ready by June, July for the legal review. Then we're planning if bargaining will be completed as scheduled by the end of July, then we are planning to start negotiation with SEIU in August and spend August and September in negotiation process. Then October we will use for finalizing the standards and preparing the standards for public comments. And as you remember, the Early Start Act mandated timeline is that we will start implementing the standards by November of this year. So this is what we see the first implementational step as putting the standards for public comments, kind of preparing them for the filing the rule process. And we will have the public comment process from starting in November and through January. So right now we are thinking about putting the standards online for their independent comments, field standards, and we're also planning to have a number of community activities around the state with meetings discussing different subsets of standards. Then in February, March, we will spend on finalizing the standards per the public comments and then filing the rule. And then we also would like to use February, the time from February to August 17 next year in communication about the new standards with the providers and with the communities, and also training providers as well as training licensors on the new standards. I also would like to bring to your attention one more component of the standards alignment process, which will be more specific for WAC. Before implementing the standards, the full progression of the standards, we would like to go through the weighted WAC process. Because right now, as you know, our regulations have, all regulations, doesn't matter how much, they're all important, but at the same time, there are different risk factors that each regulation is covering. So right now, all regulations have the same weight. So it doesn't matter, do you have kind of recording a reporting issue, or do you have actually huge risk, potential risk issue at your site. Right now we're looking at state looking at them in a similar way. So what we would like to have, a more weighted approach where specific standards and regulations that are focusing on safety and health of children, first of all, and have the huge risk behind them, they will have kind of a high level of deficiency than other standards which are not so much about health and safety, more programmatic type of administrative type of regulations. So it will be a community type of process, and we would like to present to you kind of an idea of methodology, how to do weighted WAC process and how to implement the weighted WAC process next time. A number of states went through the process. their methodology behind it and their national support behind it, so in regard of expertise. So we would like to introduce it to you next time. There is a question. Will there be a draft of the standards revised available to review by this committee or for final public comment? So let us to look at it in regard of the timeline. We definitely would like you to see the draft prior, but at the same time there is public comments process. So let's think how to organize it. Will it be a group review? So the advisory committee will be able to come together for a couple of days and dig into their standards because we don't feel comfortable providing some of the community members who are you with a full set of standards before the public comments process. So if you are interested to help us to review, let's think about how to do it as a group review. So maybe a couple of days of standards review retreat or something like that for the advisory committee. If it sounds good to you, please let me know, and then we will think how to organize it in consideration of number of members in the committee, because if you will look at the list of our advisory committee members, it's approximately a list of like 60, 65 people, 82 people. So definitely we can be creative in regard of how to organize the group review. Any questions and comments in regard of the group review, timeline, or community feedback process? So before I will move forward with next steps, and just taking advantage of Jennifer being here, I would like to ask, would it be possible for the Children's Alliance to maybe next time to present us with the idea that they have behind this particular opportunity. And they was very excited about Children's Alliance idea and specifically focus on racial equity and cultural humility and looking at how to develop a tool that will help us all to be able to review standards specifically, but hopefully not standards only, kind of a more universal tool that will help us to consistently have racial equity and cultural humility lens. Doesn't matter what we're developing, and doesn't matter what we're implementing. So it's why I put kind of this point to the next step. So if Children's Alliance will be open to do that, and I will chat with Jennifer about it. But for now, I just wanted everyone to be aware of the opportunity and also think who will be the best person that you can recommend for the Children's Alliance to consider for this particular contractor position. So for the next time, we're planning to finalize group size ratio and mixed age grouping standards to your suggestions. There have been a couple of very important things to consider that we didn't think before, so we will polish it and try to answer. One of them being around space and how we can consider space in regard of mixed age grouping. There's some consideration that we have to think about. And another piece that's been brought to our attention is as children will grow through a year, how we will be able to keep the ratios in place in regard of capacity of different age groups within the group, within one group size. Then we also finalize professional development standards. It seems like we didn't talk about it. Yes. Yes, so Angela is, I'm sorry. Angela is waiting to talk about professional development. Totally my fault. I'm so sorry, Angela. So let's go to professional development standards right now. Sorry about that. It's my fault.
there's lots of exciting things happening. And so Angela, as she goes through, is going to take a look at the questions and answer kind of as she goes along because she has access to those.
I'm sorry about that again. My fault. Go ahead,
Oh, no,
Angela.
that's okay.
Sorry.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So this next section, we're going to spend some time talking about professional development. And I also want to echo the thank you to everyone who has sent very meaningful and insightful feedback. As you can imagine, this is a very broad topic, and it touches on a lot of areas of our system as we think about how do we support those who are providing the educational support and guidance to children in the classrooms, as well as the broader workforce development and supports for community. So bringing back to where we originally started, we with 3 recommendations, 3 options, or 3 within option 2. So what you see in front of you here is the original 3 areas of focus. And as we began thinking further about how are we going to do this, what does implementation look like, knowing that given a lot of the feedback that we've received hasn't been necessarily tied to we don't agree. It's been more to how is this going to work, what are we going to do, what supports need to be in place, what will implementation look like. And we've honestly felt the same way. So if we look at the next slide, it can show some of the challenges that we identified early on about the previous 2 options that we're not kind of looking at so closely today. And those were, as it relates to option 2B, that was focused on a percentage. We knew that that was going to take a lot of monitoring, a lot of stress on our system, and it was going to be tied to early achievers levels and was going to require a lot to keep track of. Option 2C, which we spent a lot of time talking about the last time, was saying that we were going to allow a flexible system that would require professional development, still tied to a point system, but was also going to be heavy on monitoring, technical assistance, heavy on licensing and support from early achievers, and again, tying back to early achievers levels as well. As we were hearing your feedback and also thinking about what we knew and identified as challenges, we started to wonder, maybe there's another way of doing this. Maybe if we look at option 2A, which meant that everyone came in with a set small amount, I'm trying to think of what I'm saying here, small amount of an increase from where we currently are and progressing there, but also considering how can we focus on implementation to make sure that we have the pieces and systems in place. So I would like to go through those options again with you and then talk further in as we go along about what might a weighting system look like and a flexible timeline look like for option 2A. So here's the original chart that we've been kind of showing through the variety of options. You'll see under proposed WAC, we're looking at centers having the ECE state certificate for director level, the state certificate for a lead teacher, and an initial certificate for an assistant. You can see it progresses as we look at those who would receive subsidy, such as EA level 3, and then those who are participating in ECAP, EA level 4. You'll notice that throughout you'll see an ECAP highlight in red showing where there's differentiation between an EA level 4 and those who are also serving an ECAP. For family child care, you'll notice the ECE short certificate as the proposed WAC for the licensee or the owner, the ECE short certificate for the primary staff, and an initial certificate for an assistant. Again, knowing that it progresses as you look at levels 3 and levels 4. No questions so far, so I'm going to keep rolling through. As you look at this next slide, I'm going to go through this slowly. There's a lot of information here, and I want to make sure that we're highlighting all of what's here. We want to know that we have some recognition in place for those that are currently as well as those that are entering new. So I'm going to go first on the left-hand side of the column through the existing column, and these are individuals defined as those who are already employed or are already a licensee, looking at both family child care and centers prior to the release and implementation of the new WAC, which we're coming upon. As we noticed in the timeline, we're still working through the timeline and when that final date would be. So existing would be anyone who is already active prior to that date. What we would want to do is to encourage people to have the required minimum education standards by 2023. What that would allow is an estimate of 5 years' time. If we assume that by 2019 people are already on board, like with the new WAC, and then going to 2023 for that 5-year span. So that would be if someone were coming in They know that they have their education met. In 2019, they come in with that education. But we also know that would be the, as we use in merit planning world, the happy path. We also know, though, that there are some additional considerations that we need to think about with the existing workforce. One is we want to be able to recognize and look at those who are serving in the field right now, who are experienced and who have maybe done an extensive amount of professional development and training, who have been in the field for a long time, and who have maybe great history with their licensing, with compliance, and are doing great for the field. So we want to be able to consider a waiver system or a recognition for those who meet a set of criteria that is still yet to be determined and ironed out, but so that we have a way of saying, you have been in the field, you've demonstrated this quality based on this criteria, we are going to waive you from this educational standard by giving you this waiver. The second is we also know, and so that's one part of it. The second thing we know is that some people might need a little bit more time because of a few reasons. It might be tied to their primary language. It might be tied to the fact that they're coming in as an immigrant provider. They've established a small business or part of the refugee community, and English might not be their primary language. They might have full intention and interest in meeting that educational standard, but because maybe they don't have access to those programs yet, or we're still working on rolling those out in their community, we want to be able to provide an extended timeline for them to be able to meet that education, and we recognize that they're on the path to do that. And so with a flexible timeline approach, we would be able to offer them more time. So a question that sometimes comes up is, can an immigrant provider still fall under the previous bullet of an experienced provider? And the answer is yes. If I am also an experienced provider, I've immigrated to this country, my education might have been completed, and I come in and I have great, whatever the criteria may be, remember we still have to define that more fully, but I have great licensing compliance history, I've completed X, Y, and Z for my training and maybe other credits that have been earned along the way, we would still be able to consider the waiving system for that provider as well. Any questions? I don't have any types so far on the existing.
There are no questions or comments so far. You can go.
Okay.
The new.
So on the right-hand column of that same slide, we have for new providers. So everything prior was for those who are existing. For new, this would mean that those who are brought on after the new WAC is released, we would want a couple of things. We would want to see that they have either already met the education standard upon entering or applying for the license. So if they're a family child care provider, at the moment they applied for their license, we would want them to have that educational background. Or if they're a center staff and they're coming on, we would want them to have that educational background. In the event that they do not, we want to still build capacity within communities to provide the culturally responsive and relevant care. We know that we need to still continue to support growing our own within communities, and that may mean supporting them as they complete their educational milestones. What we would like to see upon either application or employment is that we have some sort of proof of commitment to meet those education standards. So we would want to offer them a 1.5 year time from the point that they entered to complete whatever that educational milestone may be, whether it was for homes or for centers. And so that would be 1.5 years from the date of the family child care's initial license for, in the case of family child care, and then that amount of time for those who are applying for their role in a center if we were talking about a center setting. In 2023, we would hope that all new family child care licensees and staff who enter meet the 2023 educational standards. I still don't have any questions. Oh, so we do have one. Go ahead. Were you going to say something in the room? Okay, so we do have one that just came through and saying that I missed a bit. The new standards do or do not include a bachelor's for lead teachers. Well, let's go back and look at that chart one more time. So if we look at the chart, it varies because we're talking about progressing through dependent on if we're looking at WAC or if we're progressing through ECAP or early achievers. So if you go to the slide that has the chart for centers and homes, it was back a couple. There we go. The current WAC is not necessarily saying that for a center. But the minute that you go into providing care and receiving subsidy for a director and for a lead, it would be an associate's degree. Then, as you progress into providing potentially ECAP, it would be a bachelor's degree for a director and a lead teacher. So in WAC, it's not a bachelor's degree, but if you choose to provide and serve an ECAP, then you would have a bachelor's degree. So on the kind of where we go from here, what are the things that we need to continue to clarify? We want to make sure that we're also thinking about how we're defining some of this as we move forward. Another question came through saying, has it been tested in the current available education options and the time a working person would be able to meet the standards? Why has 1.5 years to complete a current course of study the required level? So we have been looking about at the time that it takes someone to get through a period of time, and we've recognized that based on our scholarship data and the completion data that we have from higher education. When we look at the current data of our workforce, which isn't included here, but we do know that 40% of ECAP providers have a bachelor's degree, and we're showing 50% of those in a director role that are verified in merit have a bachelor's degree as well. So many of them are on a path of completing their educational program. We want to continue to be able to reflect on that data to make that plan moving forward. One of the pieces, let me see, there's another question that ties to this. So related to why 1.5 years, another question has come through, what happens if we can't manage to get the lead teachers certified, especially in rural areas and in the multilingual community? And this really goes back to relying and supporting and informing our higher education system and our scholarship model to be able to support people to go through. I think one of the areas that's sometimes difficult to wrap even our brains around internally and make sure that we have all the pieces in place is how can we inform a system that builds the pathways needed, relying on our higher education partners and our scholarships model to support that, so that we can think of it as a way that the demand would inform the supply instead of wondering how the supply is going to hold back the demand. So what can we do to continue to put resources and support into our partners so that we can build from there? And what that would mean is doing things differently than what we've been doing and have done before. We want to make sure that we have community cohorts offered and embedded within rural communities so that they are in the ground within the communities so that we don't experience barriers as often as travel or, someone finishing their work at a certain time and still needing to go to classes. How can we bring more educational coursework to them? And how can we think creatively about competency-based degrees? We have a new growing interest in applied bachelor's degrees. What can we continue to do to progress the system so that we can meet our workforce needs? I think there was one more question up higher that I missed. Maybe I addressed it.
I thought you kind of blended all those together. I'm sorry.
I think I did too. Okay, then here's the next one, which I kind of smiled to myself. I hope you're planning a major campaign to convince the legislature because this is really expensive. It would be great, but very expensive, and I'm not entirely sure many legislators have bought in yet. We're with you. I mean, it is a very, very big step. It's a bold step, but we think it's a critical component to meeting the goals that we have for child outcomes and for really being able to demonstrate a way, not only for our state, but even nationally, how can we support our early learning workforce to be able to meet the needs of the children and the families that they're serving in a way that's very culturally responsive and respectful. We do have a lot of strong support with our higher education system, and we need to continue to build that partnership. But I have to say that they're also very committed and interested in seeing this go through and be supported. It's not only informed by the work that we're doing here, but then also by national research. How do we take what we're learning in the last few years and really begin to apply it? Because we've grown a lot as far as what the data is showing us, even from 20 years ago to 10, and even in the last 5. So again, the question is, 1.5 years sufficient? There's already accessibility issues in meeting the high school diploma and education requirement. Are the lessons learned there that could lengthen this timeline? I think there's a lot of lessons learned and continuing to be learned as it relates to the high school diploma and education requirement. As many of you know on the call, we do have within our WAC that family child care providers need to have an initial certificate or equivalent high school it's actually high school education or equivalent, and initial certificate is one of the ways of many in doing that. And that to me really speaks to this next slide that we're on right now about how do we continue to define and articulate and really have a policy in place that supports providers and implementation in a way that maybe we do things a little bit differently than we've continued to do along the way. So under the definitions, we're talking about considerations for licensing compliance, professional development, and training, and completed during the year's license and experience. We also want to make sure that we are clearly communicating what it means to be committed or enrolled, what does that look like and what does that mean, and allowing for a timeline for an additional waiver. Another question is, one of the things that happened with Head Start is that our lead teacher cohort became wider when the BA requirement came in. And I think that's something that we really need to think about as a community, and that goes to how can we really focus on the implementation of this with our higher ed partners and with our other community partners to make sure that we're recruiting and supporting providers where they are. We know that providers learn within the context, and that shouldn't say providers, adults in general as well as children, learn within the context of relationships and grounded in their culture and experiences. This puts a little bit of push and tension and growth on all of our educational offering institutions to say, how can we continue to embed that within our early learning programs as a state? We have professional development plans to bring teachers to a BA, but it often takes more than 5 years. And we can consider continuing to look at more data. The data that we have right now of those that are verified in merit are showing a high number of people closer to having a bachelor's degree than I had thought prior to looking at that data. It's something that I think we need to continue to reflect on and look at so that we can make very informed decisions about the timeline. If that's an area that the group is recommending we spend a little bit more time thinking about and showing data to support that, I think that's something we can definitely do and provide. Katie said no, not more than 5 years, more than 1.5 years. Maybe if I said something wrong when I was talking, I apologize. So the other part that we want to clarify on the top part, and going kind of out of order here, is that we want to be able to provide guidance on how education requirements may be grandfathered or translated into the new structure. So we know that there are many certificates right now that are recognized in the in our system, in our educational system, and verified by merit as counting towards an ECE degree or certificate. And we want to make sure that we're considering all of what we're currently recognizing and not creating barriers for those who may have other certificates already, and so that we create a pathway for them to see themselves within the current structure. So examples of that might be the CDA. How do we take those who have a CDA, which has been in the WEC for quite some time, who many people have that, and recognize the work that they're doing, either feeding into the current structure and or ways that we can take that as a standalone and really be thoughtful about recognizing the accomplishments of the field already. Another example is Montessori certification. We know that that's something that we do recognize in many parts of our system for those who have it. Those are just two examples of many that we want to make sure that we're building into our thinking and planning. Any other questions? I don't see any on the chat box. So I feel like I've heard for some additional information around timelines, especially around the 1.5 years as it relates to when someone already enters the field for new individuals. Is that enough time for someone to be recruited from the field and complete their education from where they're coming in 1.5 years? Thank you again for all the feedback that you've provided. Yeah, thank you.
There's a question, Angela, about...
Yeah, I just would like to see the Montessori certificate built into the stackable education degrees. That's an interesting idea, and I think that's something we can definitely think about. Right now I can tell you that the higher education system, the community and technical colleges, have also been talking about it could be time to reflect and revisit the stackables to see what have we learned over the last 5 years that they've been implemented, and is there anything that we can do to improve them. So that would be something that could definitely be a part of that conversation.
Thank you, Angela. And again, I apologize for mixing things together and totally forgetting about the professional development. I'm sorry about that. So going back to summary and next steps, seems like this is what we're proposing: finalize group size ratio and mixed age grouping, finalize professional development, review implementation plan and dependencies. So this will be our first time that we will look at some implementational pieces. We'll look at the timeline today and very briefly talked about communication and trainings that we're thinking to put in place as a part of implementational plan, but there is much more, as you can imagine. So we would like to bring to you our initial thinking. And I would like to say from the beginning that some of you are very well prepared to kind of be our thinking partners, and it seems like some of you would like to have kind of a well-developed product to consider and to critique. So we need to figure out the balance between it. So we would love you to be thinking partners. This is what we need. But it seems to me that some of you don't want to be in a role of a thinking partner. You would like to be more kind of critiquing the final product. So what you will see in regard of implementation will require you being our thinking partners. So for the next meeting, if you are not fully prepared to be a thinking partner, maybe you will skip it and then wait till we will finalize the product, and then you will chime in. It's your personal decision. I'm not anyhow discouraging anyone to continue to participate. I just would like to prepare you. It's where we're going to be, and would like you to put yourself on kind of a thinking partner hat and be ready to not critique but comment and recommend and suggest and be solution based. So we would work on our IT pieces and try to figure out how to allow you to talk. So we right now have approximately 25 people online, so it's fine. I believe it's manageable to have 25 people taking turns and talking, as long as we will be respectfully giving others an opportunity to express their opinions, recommendations, and suggestions. So we will try it next time as we will start looking at the implementational steps. And also I will contact Jennifer and Children's Alliance in regard of kind of talking a little bit more about the idea of racial equity analysis framework. Any other comments, questions, suggestions for the next meeting? So thank you for being on Friday, sunny Friday, warm Friday. I guess it's sunny. I don't know. I'm without windows right now, but I hope it's sunny. But I know for sure it's Friday afternoon. Thank you. Have a good weekend.